Okay, I have hit record, so I'm going to make sure that little record button is always showing up.
So watch what we say.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought when the meat of the Bible study was not showing up, I thought, I wonder if the Holy Spirit somehow censored. But I don't think we didn't talk any crap about the end of Genesis. But on to Exodus. And this article is from the Word and World, which I subscribe to. It's a Lutheran publication out of Luther Seminary. And I've read it for years. It always has some very on-point articles. And I thought I would share this one with you. You know, I've mentioned several times that people are able to write dissertations out of very small biblical texts. This is an article on the first 7 verses of Exodus. And it begins by saying, there are no meaningless biblical texts, which is true. But he goes on to prove that there's some significant things to be learned in the first 7 verses of the book of Genesis. Exodus. Exodus is what we have is a whole new generation. I mean, you know, all the people who were dealt with or covered in Genesis are gone. They're not talked about here, other than in the first verse when it says these are the names and the information on the offspring. This comes from Genesis, but this time it's laid out differently. The names of the people are not listed by chronological order. They're listed by mothers. The first 2 names, Reuben and Simeon, are offspring of Rachel. And then the next 3 are another mother. So they're broken out by mothers. And you notice they don't list in that. They don't list Joseph in that. Benjamin. Or Benjamin. So Joseph is not listed, except in verse 6 it said, then Joseph died.
Yeah. Well, it says, in verse 4, it says Joseph was already in Egypt.
Yes. So,
in Egypt.
So here we have, in this, the first few verses, we're saying, hey, something is happening that's going to be different than was talked about in Genesis. The other thing that's interesting in there is it says, but the descendants of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Remember the promise to Abraham?
Yeah.
Your offspring will be numbered greater than the stars in the heaven, the sand on the seashore. So this is reaffirming that promise that God gave to Abraham, with one significant difference. They were in the wrong place. They were in Egypt. They weren't in the promised land, because the God, Yahweh, had never promised them Egypt. You know, he said, you can have an Airbnb trip, but that's not where you're going to live. So this creates a problem, because we've got to get them from Egypt back to where they belong. And so that kind of is the precursor to what's going to happen in Exodus. So this is really, I think, a very interesting article. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. It's very thoughtful. We got 7 pages on the first 7 verses of the book of Genesis.
1 page a verse. 1 page a verse.
Almost. So, it was written in Spanish originally, but it's well translated. Now, Kathy read the first few verses of Exodus. So
We're at chapter 2.
Chapter 2.
Mm-hmm.
yes. So, chapter 2.
Okay.
Now, before you get started, let me say that one of the other things about these first couple chapters, especially in chapter 2 and 3, we don't know who wrote what, because it's a combobulation. And I know this is difficult to see, but I'll turn my Bible around, and you can see at the end of chapter 2, it says that section is from the priestly writer. This section is from the Yahwist. This is from the Elohist. This is the Yahwist. This is the Elohist. And this is the priestly. So, I mean, it's just really, and it continues on that way with, here we have Elohist material, and then concludes with Yahwist. So, I highlighted, as I've told you before, in yellow, that which is Yahwist, but in this area it gets very confusing because the Yahwist and the Elohist are just so combined that nobody really is sure. So other than this Bible right here, this is pretty sure. So, okay, let's do it.
Okay. The birth of Moses. Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got him a wicker basket and covered it over with tar and pitch. Then she put the child into it and set it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to find out what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the Nile, with her maidens walking alongside the Nile, and she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid, and she brought it to her. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the boy was crying. And she had pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go ahead." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. The child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, and said, "Because I drew him out of the water." Now it came about in those days.
Let's pause there for just a minute. We got a couple things that pop up here. We don't know who the father of this child is.
I think we do.
Who?
Levi.
Amram.
The son of Levi.
A man from the house of Levi.
Yeah, that married
The daughter.
the daughter.
Amram and Jochebed. I don't know where that came from. It just
Aminadab
popped
and
in my head.
Jochebed, it tells later on in one of the genealogies.
But see this, it doesn't say, it just says somebody from the tribe of Levi.
Okay.
It doesn't specify who is actually the father. It says, now a man from the house of Levi went and took a wife, a daughter of Levi.
So we don't know either one of them at this point.
That's right. The woman conceived and bore a son, which she saw that he was a goodly child, and she hid him for 3 months. Now, why was she hiding him?
Because Pharaoh wanted all baby boys killed.
Pharaoh wanted to kill all the baby boys. And to make sure that this happened, what did Pharaoh do?
He told the midwives to do it.
He told the midwives that if a son was born, they were to be notified so they could put the son to death.
Yeah.
Now, I read a very interesting article from one of the commentaries. The midwives had to lie. Lying was not one of the things that the Jews thought highly of.
Thou shalt not bear false witness.
Thou shalt not bear false witness. Now, they don't have those commandments yet, but it doesn't mean they didn't exist in God's heart, and probably in man's heart. So here we have Moses surviving because the midwives lied. And the midwives were what? Hebrew women. So, there's a big conflict. Was this good? And, this is one of those things like Kierkegaard, the philosopher, raised way later in the world when he said, if it's good for the many, can you hurt the one? If we can do one thing, one bad thing to one person so that everything else is better, is that good? Well, he raised that question. It's the same question that's raised here. They lied, but it was for a good thing. But they lied. So, here we're starting off the book of Exodus. We're really not beyond the first chapter, because that's when he talks about, he wanted these women to report. And now, not only is Moses not put to death, but he's now raised by the Pharaoh's daughter, who's complicit in this. And she raises him as her son. Isn't it amazing the way some of the Hebrews went to Egypt and then hooked up with the Pharaoh? We had Joseph, who became the servant who took care of everybody.
The vizier.
The
vizier.
Yes. He had a brazier. Let's keep it on the up and up here. But now we have Moses, who is a Hebrew. Now is the Pharaoh's grandson. So God's hand is at work in this somehow. So now let's find out what's going to happen.
He's going to kill an Egyptian.
Oh, you spoiled it.
Verse 11.
Now it can't. I guess better turn this thing on. I think there it goes. Now it came about in those days when Moses had grown up that he went out to his brethren and looked on their hard labors. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way and that, and when he saw there was no one around, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. He went out the next day, and behold, 2 Hebrews were fighting with each other. And he said to the offender, "Why are you striking your companion?" But he said, "Who made you a prince or a judge over us? Are you intending to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Hang on a minute. Moses was afraid and
It's
said,
turned off. Is battery go dead?
"I think so. It's not." Yeah,
We got another one in here. Let's get it.
it did its thing.
All it had left.
Yeah. It didn't want me to read, I guess. I don't know.
Here, I'm not sure how to turn them on.
Oh, okay. Well, this little button down here. Yeah, is that green?
Are you in chapter 3 now?
No,
No, it's still chapter 2.
No,
Yeah, you are.
chapter
You're in
2.
chapter 2.
no, I,
Where are you reading?
Chapter 2, verse
She doesn't
14.
know. Chapter 2, I have.
Verse 14.
Yeah, chapter
I'm
2.
finishing verse 14. Was afraid and said, "Surely the matter has become known." Let's go back to the end here. Okay, verse 14. But he said, "Who made you a prince or a judge over us? Are you intending to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and said, "Surely the matter has become known." When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. Then the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. When they came to rule their father, he said, "Why have you come back so soon today?" So they said, "An Egyptian delivered us from the hand of the shepherds, and what is more, he even drew the water for us and watered the flock." He said to his daughter, "Where is he then? Why is it that you have left the man behind? Invite him to have something to eat." Moses was willing to dwell with the man, and he gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses. Then she gave birth to a son, and he named him Gresham. For he said, "I have been a sojourner in a foreign land." Now it came about in the course of those many days that the king of Egypt died, and the sons of Israel sighed because of the bondage, and they cried out, and their cry for help because of their bondage rose up to God. So God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God saw the sons of Israel, and God took notice of them. Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro.
Okay, we're going to pause there before we get into chapter 3. The message, I like the way they, when Moses tries to break up the fight between the two Israelites, the one, he says, "Why are you hitting your neighbor?" And one of the guys shot back, "Who do you think you are telling us what to do? Are you going to kill me the same way you killed that Egyptian?" And it says, then Moses panicked. Word has gotten out. People know about me. So Pharaoh heard about it, and then he wanted to kill Moses. So Moses got away. And where did he go?
Midian.
To the land of Midian. And remember,
Where the Shriners started.
that's where the Shriners started. Remember that Midian was one of the 6 sons of Keturah. So this is how the connection to Yahweh is made through, he went to Midian. He went to a place that was an offspring.
Keturah was Abraham's
It's
concubine.
yeah. Well, we like to call it close friend. Because it sounds better in court when you make the reference that way. So the priest of Midian, Ruel, has his daughters out, watering the flock. Moses helps him, and because he was so helpful, the priest of Midian gave Moses Zipporah, which means bird. I don't know if she had another name, like Larry Bird, but she was Zipporah, and he became a wife, and he had a son. So, all of this familial thing is happening within the Hebrew tradition. That he married a woman who obviously was Hebrew. And
They weren't banished to Egypt they hadn't gone to Egypt like
That's right.
Most families.
That's right. And, Moses said, where you said a sojourner, is that the word that was used in your Bible?
Sojourn, yeah.
Yeah.
New International says, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. The Message, though, says sojourner, saying, I am a sojourner in a foreign land. So then Scripture tells us, depending upon your translation, it's either during that long period or many years later, the king of Egypt died. And the Israelites had groaned under his rule. And God heard this groaning, and he saw what was going on. And the Message says, the last sentence in chapter 2 is, God understood.
Mine says, and God knew.
And God knew.
He must have been there 40 years, because he started the Exodus when he was 80, and he was 40 when he left Egypt. So he hung around Midian for close to 40 years.
Yes. Yeah, this is a long piece of history. We don't get a whole lot of what was going on, except chapter 3 will give us a little bit more detail on
It
what.
doesn't tell us that he had a second son either. We find that out later on.
That's right.
When Zipporah
Well,
circumcises him.
They found out he had a second son when the Ancestry.com message came in.
They were from the same wife?
Same wife, yeah. Yeah, he was married to Zipporah, who was also known for making a lighter. They just called them Zippos. But so now we're coming to what I think is a really powerful message.
Well, now, was Larry Bird from here or Emporia?
That's what I thought of.
The two are connected.
You're talking about the Celtic basketball player?
Larry Bird, the one that had the fair.
It was
No, we're talking about the basketball player, Larry Bird.
No, I'm talking about the Larry Bird that was from around here in Emporia, Kansas.
and
Yeah.
What's that got to do with the Bible?
Well, that falls under the adultery section, but that comes later.
her daughters were in Central Christian with my girls. My
I don't remember. All I know is it was quite an affair.
I know. I didn't realize his name was Larry Bird. I was thinking about the Larry Bird who was from French Lick, Indiana, the basketball player. So,
Well, sorry, we thought it was Larry Bird that.
We've been in town too long.
yeah. Okay, let's get into chapter 3.
French Lick's a nice place, though.
Yes, it is.
Well, and I'm familiar with Emporia too.
Moving on.
Okay.
Yeah,
Chapter 3.
we'll leave the Lutherans behind.
It was
Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God.
Now we're going to stop for just a minute.
Okay.
What'd they call him?
Horeb.
No.
Well, they called him Jethro. We changed authors.
It was called earlier Ruel,
Rule.
and now he's called Jethro.
Actually, mine said he was a priest of Ruel.
Chapter 3, verse
So
1.
maybe Ruel was the town. I wasn't sure how that.
Well, but it says Moses was shepherding the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law.
She's
So,
saying hers doesn't say that.
In the previous chapter,
oh,
it
okay.
sounded like Ruel was a town instead of a name.
Well,
No,
I'm not in my.
Rule was the father.
verse 18, when they came to rule their father, he said, "Why have you come back so soon today?"
Mine
So
says,
that's
yeah,
her father.
but it's in my version. It sounds different, like they'd return
Sound
to
like
the
it's a place
town.
now.
Return to the place.
Well, they returned to where they lived, yes.
Well,
It doesn't matter.
well, now that could be too, because it
I don't
said,
know why it took so long to get through the Bible.
when they came to rule,
Yeah, we're arguing Ancestor.com stuff.
Well, when people had flocks, they didn't live in towns. They lived in tents.
A region.
So
I heard something.
it would have been Rule's tent.
well,
Well, it's Jethro is easier to pronounce.
Yeah.
Let's-
it does sound like that they came to a place,
It's pretty important.
and then their father said,
Get this right.
their, well, no,
mine
it
says
says it's their father, so,
mine says when they came home to their father Rule.
okay, well, this is,
But like a lot of people living in Kansas, he went by another name.
Well, actually, it means we've changed authors, doesn't it?
Well,
Because one of them would have been,
yeah, we're now reading what is J stuff,
yeah.
which
And
is
the second we're
Yahweh's.
reading
The first one was reading Elois. So it could just it's how the name is translated. Anyway, let's go with chapter 3.
okay, we're on verse 2. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, "I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up." When the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush. He said, "Moses, Moses," and he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "Do not come near here. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." He said also, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have given heed to their cry because of their masters, for I am aware of their sufferings. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanite and the Hittite
The Amorites,
and the Amorite and the
Perizzites,
Pezerite and the Hivite.
Hivites, and the Jebusites.
Okay. Hivite and the Jebusites.
Circus.
Now, behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians are oppressing them. The mission of Moses. Therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I will be with you, and this shall be the sign that to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. Then Moses said to God, Behold, I am going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they may say to me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you.
Okay, let's pause there for a minute, because this is a significant part of this chapter and of this book. When I'm going to sneeze.
Gesundheit.
When
Gesundheit.
allergy season, I'll have to edit those out, assuming we've got the text. When you know someone's name, it implies a relationship. Excuse me. All of us here, when we grew up, would never call a neighbor by their first name.
No, really, Mr. or Mrs.
It was Mr. and Mrs.
The children you could call by name.
Children you call, but you could not call an adult. Excuse me. And I don't remember ever calling a teacher by their first name.
No.
You would
No.
never do that.
It was either
Or a drill sergeant.
Or a drill sergeant. Yeah, his name was Sergeant.
Don't call me sir.
Yeah.
The teacher always wrote their last name on the board.
That's right. That's right. And you always use their last name, because using a first name implied an equal relationship. So when Moses says to God, hey, people are going to say, who sent you? You know, what's this God's name? Well, why is it important to know this God's name? They knew Baal. They knew all the other gods' names. But they didn't know the God Yahweh. And in Hebrew scripture, they will write out Yahweh in Hebrew. It's a 4-letter name. They would write that out, but they would never say Yahweh. They would always use another term for it.
Adonai.
Adonai was the other term that they would use for God.
And what's the significance of that?
Because if you knew God's name, that implied you had a relationship with Him.
I see.
That
You had power.
Hmm?
You had power.
yeah, you had power.
You had power.
Okay.
And nobody can have power over God.
Well, some of us are a little slow at catching up. So
Yeah.
appreciate that.
So it what it does is it gives us by having the people are going to say, what God are you talking about? Because is it Baal? Is it Beelzebub? Is it Harry? What's your God's name? And so Moses said, I am who I am.
Yeah.
I am who I am. That means none of your beeswax, in a way. And so tell the people of Israel, I am sent you. And
The Israelites in Egypt at this time would not know Moses because it's been 40 years, and that
Yeah.
generation died off and
Right.
knew who he was.
Yeah, but the terms for murder never passes. So when he goes back, he's still a murderer.
Was it the same Pharaoh and he remembered Moses when he came back, or is this his offspring or something?
I'm
Probably
not
not.
sure. It's probably one or two generations down
He
the
didn't hear
road.
the story. There's this.
Yeah, he knew the story of what happened. So anyway,
So why is he listening to him?
well, we'll find out. Moses has a few tricks up his sleeve.
Yeah.
I am has some tricks for Moses. So here we have this important thing that God is revealed to Moses, but he's revealed to Moses on faith.
Bring home a loaf of bread.
Yeah,
Jar, skip in and listen to that.
it's on faith.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Is somebody trying to let you know your auto warranty is out?
Probably.
Okay, let's continue on with verse 15.
Verse 15.
Okay. God furthermore said to Moses, "Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial name to all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I am indeed concerned about you and what has been done to you in Egypt. So I said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites,
Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, and Hivites, and Jebusites.
to the land flowing with milk and honey. I hope that went in, but anyway. They will pay heed to what you say, and you with the elders of Israel will come to the king of Egypt, and you will say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. So now, please let us go a 3 days journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not permit you to go except under compulsion. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my miracles, which I shall do in the midst of it, and after that he will let you go. I will grant this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall be that when you go, you shall not go empty-handed. But every woman shall ask of her neighbor, and the woman who lives in her house, articles of silver and articles of gold and clothing, and you will put them on your sons and daughters. Thus you will plunder the Egyptians.
Okay. You got to wonder, did God regret telling him to take the silver and the gold?
That's kind of a little going back. It's toward the end of chapter 2, the burning bush, verse 23. A long time passed during which the king of Egypt died. I don't know if that's talking about the Pharaoh or not.
Yeah, that's a Pharaoh.
Yeah,
So that's a new Pharaoh.
yeah. And it probably is 2 new pharaohs by the time he gets back there. So here we have, when I say God probably regrets that, what did the people do when Moses was up on the mountain?
They
They make a golden calf.
They made the golden calf. God probably said, darn, I wish I hadn't have told them to take all that gold. I mean, I'll make them carve it out of a bar of soap. So here, God is saying, believe me, they will listen to you. And the leaders of Israel will go to the king of Egypt and say to him, God, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness. That 3-day journey turned into 40 years.
Oh,
So what God is saying, go tell me you just want to take a 3-day journey. You want a 3-day camp out. Long weekend. Tell us for Memorial Day, you just want to go out, you want a 3 days journey and have a picnic. And then God says, I know the king of Egypt won't let you go unless forced to. Go ask him this, but he's not going to grant it to you. So I'll intervene. And intervene he did.
So when it says, go assemble the elders of Israel, so they must have had a system of leadership, even though they were in slavery.
Well, I'm sure they must have.
I never thought of that before.
Yeah. Yeah, they when you've got people all suffering the same situation.
Some people rise to leadership
Yes.
responsibility.
But no one had the courage to confront the Pharaoh. And which is interesting because what was the Pharaoh's original concern about the Egyptians, or about the Hebrews?
They would overtake.
They were overtaking. So, here, this is an example where you've got the largest population having someone put their thumb on them from a smaller group of people. And, it was kind of like when somebody said, we ought to do something about the, shh, don't talk like that. They'll hear you. And apparently the gossip routine worked pretty well over there. Because remember, Moses killed that guy. People heard about it. I mean, that kind of news travels fast.
yeah.
But he didn't get arrested.
He got
Fled.
He got out of Dodge.
Oh,
He was in master, really.
Yeah.
He
Got out
fled.
of Dodge.
Yeah.
He knew he would, so he fled.
He just got out of Dodge.
So let's go into chapter 4.
Then Moses said, what if they will not believe me or listen to what I say? For they may say, the Lord has not appeared to you. The Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. Then he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from it. But the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand and grasp it by its tail. So he stretched out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. That they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. The Lord furthermore said to him, now put your hand into your bosom. So he put his hand into his bosom. And when he took it out, before his hand was leprous like snow. Then he said, put your hand into your bosom again. So he put his hand into his bosom again. And when he took it out of his bosom, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. If they will not believe you or heed the witness of the first sign, they may believe the witness of the last sign. But if they will not believe, even these 2 signs you heed, what you say they will shall, then you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water which you take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. Then Moses said to the Lord, Please, Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither recently, nor in time past, nor since. You have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. The Lord said to him, Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes him mute or deaf, or seeing or blind? It is not I, the Lord. Now then, go, and I, even I, will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to say. But he said, Please, Lord, now send the messenger by whomever you will. Aaron to be Moses' mouthpiece. Then the anger of the Lord burned against Moses, and he said, Is there not your brother Aaron or Levi? I know that he speaks fluently, and moreover, behold, he is coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You are to speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I, even I, will be with your mouth and his mouth, and I will teach you what you are to do. Moreover, he shall speak for you to the people, and he will be as a mouth for you, and you will be as God to him. You shall take in your hand this staff, with which you shall perform the signs.
Okay, let's,
It just struck me, Moses has been out of Egypt for 40 years, so he's probably forgotten how to speak Egyptian. Aaron was living still in Egypt, so he would have been the one fluent in Egyptian. And that's partly why Moses didn't want to go, because he didn't speak Egyptian that well.
well, I think one of the other problems is people believe that Moses was a stutterer. That, you know, he didn't want to get up in front of people and try to speak when he was, you know, that.
He should have sang it. They said, no, tell us as a stutter when he's singing every stutter.
Yes,
So he should have just sang it.
So his brothers long lived just like he was.
yes, but it's interesting
But
is,
the Pharaoh, their lineage isn't very long lived.
yeah, he's been gone 40 years. How is Aaron going to recognize him?
How's he going to recognize Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, God says, don't you have a brother Aaron the Levite?
I wonder if they had been meeting every once in a while.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, you know, the Bible doesn't tell us they were, but, you know, what God is saying, let Aaron be your mouthpiece. Does it seem like we're dealing with some magic?
A little bit.
You know, this was always the problem that Paul confronted on his journeys. He'd get into some city, and the ruler of that city would have somebody advising him who could do tricks. And you know, when God says, you know, put your staff on the ground and it becomes a snake, and put your hand in your shirt, take it out, and you know, it looks leprous. Put it back in, it's fine. So, you know, Moses is saying, you know, I don't know how to do those tricks. You know, take some water from the Nile, pour it on the ground. It looked like blood. So then Moses raised another objection to God. You know, he's finally got to go for the big one. Master, please, I don't talk well. I've never been good with words either. Neither before nor after you spoke to me, I stutter and stammer. So, you know, he's concerned about that. Have you seen the movie The King's Speech? I think it's The King's Speech. It was about Elizabeth's father. When his brother stepped down as king.
George VI.
Yeah. But Elizabeth's father, who was he George VI or was it?
Yes, he was George VI.
Okay. he stuttered, and one of the things that the king or queen of England always did was deliver a Christmas message, and this was during the time of the war, and it was crucial that he assure people that England was going to win the war. And he hired someone to work with him so that he could deliver the speech. And he did without stuttering. But that was always a problem that he had throughout his reign. And thankfully Elizabeth wasn't cursed with the stutter, because she spoke eloquently. But the movie shows the pressure that he's under trying to learn how to speak. So we'll pick up with this. Some interesting stuff we haven't talked about here. All of a sudden, has anybody heard of Aaron before?
Of who?
Aaron.
Yeah.
And how did he survive?
No, I guess not. I was trying to think when Moses was born. It mentioned his sister, but it never mentioned Aaron.
No.
And his
So-
sister's Marianne.
And I think Aaron was supposed to be older than Moses.
Is that right?
Could have been. I don't know. But all of a sudden, Miriam, you mentioned, that was the sister. And, so all of a sudden, this Aaron kind of pops out of nowhere. So, but we'll find out what happened. But this is really the fulcrum for the Hebrew people. That in Genesis we had these kind of just disjointed stories that were woven together, where we find out about Joseph and Jacob, Israel, all these people, and now they're all in Egypt, and Moses is going to go pull them together and lead them to the promised land. So we'll pick up right there in the middle,
18.
verse 18 of chapter 4 next week.